Well, we're quickly moving along through this NFL offseason, and just like that, we sit only 1 week away from the start of training camp. And guys, being able to throw on pads for the first time in this new season as we welcome you into the NFC West Huddle, our weekly look around the division with some of the best experts for all 4 teams. I'm Ethan McReynolds in Seattle, joined by Keyshawn Ward in San Francisco, Blake Neiman in Phoenix, and Ryan Dyrud from the LA Fan Network in Los Angeles. You can see all his great stuff at lafbnetwork.com. Guys, can we call this training camp eve? I mean, at least for us on the Huddle, it is. Our last episode pre-training camp. We're so close to padded practices in the season starting to ramp up ahead of week 1. So with training camp set to begin next week, first question, what are the main headlines each of you are keeping an eye on for your respective team? Blake, we'll start with you on the Cardinals.
Yeah, I think the first of many storylines for the Cardinals heading into this training camp is Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray's connection, improving that chemistry from year 1 to year 2 together. The Cardinals' 4th overall pick from 2024. Got to capitalize on that opportunity. He did lead the team in touchdown receptions last season, double the next closest guy in Michael Wilson. But Trey McBride was definitely the center of attention, and rightfully so. He's an incredibly talented tight end. Definitely got his money's worth this offseason. But I think if Marvin Harrison Jr. can become a bona fide wide receiver 1, I think that's really going to improve the Cardinals' chances of competing this season, trying to get back to the postseason. Then the second biggest storyline is how legit is this defense really going to be? Some major offseason overhaul of this defense, adding Josh Sweat, a guy from the Super Bowl champion Eagles, as a edge rusher, and then also spending 6 of your 7 draft picks on defensive players, especially Walter Nolan III in the first round. And then you got the returning guys and veterans like Budda Baker. Put that all together, this defense could be quite scary, and I'm just wondering if it's going to live up to it and be legit. And then third, kind of leading into that, Jonathan Gannon's a defensive-minded coach coming from a defensive background. He says that he wants more friction in training camp. He wants to put the players, as much as the CBA will allow them to push toward the end of training camp, and have as much contact as possible. So all that together, I think, should make for an intriguing training camp this upcoming week for the Cardinals.
Man, that is great to hear. As much contact as possible. Definitely a lot better than OTAs when you're trying to make sure it's the least amount of contact as possible, not trying to get punished by the league. Ryan Dyrud over with LAFBnetwork.com. Let's go over to you, Ryan. What are the big headlines for the Rams heading into training camp?
Yeah, well, and Ethan, technically here in LA, the Chargers are actually in training camp as we speak.
All right,
they launched a week early, so you are right by saying training camp eve. But yes, the Rams next week, a lot of big storylines for this team. I'll just go offense and defense. And when you look first at the offense, it starts with the left tackle position. And obviously, Alaric Jackson is unfortunately dealing with blood clots again, so his readiness and his availability is still unknown. The hope is to get him back at some point during training camp, but there's really no guarantee with that as he kind of goes through the medical procedures to be, right and have a, healthy lifestyle besides just playing football. So what they did to counter that is Arizona Cardinal fans might know him well. DJ Humphries spent a lot of time with the Cardinals. They brought in to kind of be that left tackle in pseudo play until Alaric Jackson is ready. So how he meshes with the rest of the offensive line, plus how the depth looks on the backside, as this was a team that was just decimated on the offensive line all last season long. So how that offensive line really comes together is kind of storyline 1. Storyline 2, look at the receiver position. No Cooper Kupp. He's obviously up in Seattle, as you know, Ethan, which I'm sure you'll talk about. Devontae Adams comes over from New York to pair alongside Puka Nacua. So what does that connection look like with Matthew Stafford? What kind of target share are those two going to get? We know Matthew Stafford here in LA loves to key in kind of on one receiver. So is it Puka this year? Is it Devontae? Or do they split it well? Or do we see Tutu Atwell as wide receiver 3 get a little bit more lather? And then lastly on offense, Kyren Williams, contract year. He's still on his rookie contract. Negotiations, as we've kind of reported, have not really gone far at all. The Rams have kind of said in a nicer way that they're not willing to spend above a certain amount. Kyren Williams' camp and his agent said, hey, we're looking for double-digit average per year in the millions of dollars. So kind of at a stalemate here of what they're going to do. They obviously have drafted a running back 8 years in a row. So they've kind of played this system of, hey, we'll just draft, repeat, and replace. So this could be the last season Kyren Williams is in horns. We shall see. And then quickly on defense, Jared Verse, reigning defensive rookie of the year. Obviously a great season, had a ton of pressures, but only actually sacked the quarterback 4.5 times. So how can he up that production alongside with fellow rookie or fellow now second-year player Braden Fisk and the rest of that defensive line? Hopefully they can get after the quarterback a little bit more to take the pressure off the secondary, who has a lot of question marks that we'll probably talk about throughout all of training camp.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. Keyshawn, what about you with the Niners?
Well, the main headlines going to training camp for the 49ers, to me, will the 49ers give Juwan Jennings a new contract? Will they bring in another quarterback in camp? And then also position battles, the usual. But starting with Jennings, I believe, I get a sense that his agent is looking out for the best interest for Jennings because he's 28 years old, coming off his best production at the wide receiver position in the 49ers offense. And he knows that this is a time where Jennings can get a little more money because as he gets older, he might lose some production. And, Brandon Ayuk won't be back until week 6. So it'll be interesting to see if he'll get a contract. And although he's reporting to camp, well, his agent asked him to not participate. So that'll be something to watch. Now, the other thing I was mentioning earlier with the quarterback situation. So one of the Niners draft picks, Curtis Rourke, is going to be on a non-football injury list, just still dealing with his ACL injury. So I would imagine that Kyle Shanahan will bring another camp quarterback because right now on the depth chart, it's obviously Purdy, Mac Jones, and Tanner Mordecai. But I just feel like with, Rourke not in the mix, I cannot see Purdy and Mac Jones taking a ton of reps throughout the preseason games, joint practices. So I feel like he's going to bring another camp quarterback. And now with the position battles, who is going to play opposite of Fred Warner, who will play on the opposite side of Nick Bosa on the defensive line, and who will be the third receiver in the offense because, as I mentioned earlier, Ayuk will not be in the mix probably until later into the season. As of right now, it's going to be Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings, and after that, somebody has to establish himself as the third best receiver in the Niners offense.
Yeah, well, for the Seahawks, there's a few that I'll be keeping track of. First off, like many teams around the league, neither of the Hawks' second-round draft picks in safety Nick Eamon-Wari and tight end Elijah Arroyo have signed their rookie contracts at the time of this taping, and neither reported to training camp on Tuesday with the rest of the rookies. I'm not particularly worried about it. From what I've read, it seems like just a league-wide push from second-round picks to get their contracts fully guaranteed. Just something to monitor specifically for the Hawks since they have 2 second-rounders as opposed to most of the league with 1, both of whom, Eamon-Wari and Arroyo, are expected to contribute right away this season. So I'll be monitoring that, as will most of Seahawk Nation. On the field, I'll be watching the offensive line and quarterbacks very closely during practice. The offensive line has been a big problem for the Seahawks for the better part of a decade, and questions remain on whether only adding Gray Zabel in the first round of the draft is going to be enough of an upgrade to offset the issues they had last season, both running the ball and protecting Geno Smith. With the team not adding a guard in free agency, they're betting on their coaching being better than it was a year ago with these young players, something that is reported. Mike McDonald, John Schneider not happy with Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff last year on the staff. So there's going to be added pressure on John Bedden, who came over with Clint Kubiak from New Orleans to coach that offensive line group. I'll be specifically looking at the three-way battle at right guard between 2024 third-rounder Christian Haynes, sixth-rounder Sautoa Lamea, who was great last year, and 2023 fourth-rounder Anthony Bradford. I'm interested to see who starts with the first team on day one, and then how that evolves heading into the preseason and ultimately into the first week of the season. As for the quarterbacks, obviously Sam Darnold. He's going to have a lot of eyes on him all throughout training camp, all throughout preseason, leading up to the regular season. But I'm also going to be watching Jalen Milroe, how his accuracy looks after a full offseason of work. Did it improve at all from rookie minicamp and OTAs and full team minicamp? He's going to get a lot of reps in the preseason. It's going to be super fun to see him and to all of his athleticism, see him move his legs. But his performance in training camp and those preseason games, it's going to be huge in dictating how much Mike McDonald can actually trust him during the season to get creative with special packages for his third-round signal caller. All right, let's go over to our second topic. We're getting closer to being able to talk about actual games, but for now we're still in the thick of ranking season to get us through this long NFL offseason. So I have a couple I want to ask you guys about. First, ESPN released its top 10 quarterbacks as voted on by coaches, execs, and scouts. Matthew Stafford, Ryan, your guy, is the only one from the division to crack the top 10 at number 6. Brock Purdy and Kyler Murray were not on the list and didn't make the 2 honorable mentions either, but they did receive votes. So my question to all of you, who would you rather have between Kyler Murray or Brock Purdy? Keyshawn, I'll go over to you first. And any surprise that Purdy wasn't in the top 12?
I am a little bit surprised that Purdy wasn't in the top 12 because I still think that he's done a lot of great things for the Niners since he became the starter. I mean, he's been in an NFC title game multiple times, more than once, and he got into the Super Bowl with them and went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes. Now, who I'd rather have between Purdy and Murray? On the field, it looks like it should be Murray, but just based off results and production, I got to go with Purdy. I've seen Purdy produce when it really matters. He's had, comebacks against the Detroit Lions in an NFC title game, putting the team on his back. Now, granted, a lot of people will say, Keyshawn, he does well when he has, a lot of great weapons around him, whether it's Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, or that great offensive line with Trent Williams at the anchor. So I know people say that, but I still have to respect what he does on the field. Now, in terms of Kyler Murray, he does great in the regular season, but it just seems like he always fizzles out as the season goes on. And I can't ignore that. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm kind of shocked that the Cardinals brought him back for another year. Now, granted, I do feel like that has something to do with, they drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. They really want to make that connection. They want to make that, work. So I hear them, the fans that feel like Murray is so productive and he's such electrifying, but I got to go off results, man. Purdy does it when it matters, so I'd rather have Purdy over Murray.
All right, we got one homer take. Blake, I'll go to you, see if you follow suit. Similar question, any surprise at Kyler being outside the top 12, and are you going to back your guy over Brock Purdy and Keyshawn?
Yeah, so to answer the first part of your question, I don't necessarily think it's a surprise for much of Arizona fans, much more NFL fans around the league, that Kyler was left off the list, just given the situation with the Cardinals not having a very good season last year and just other quarterbacks doing really well. In the second part of it, I think it's such a close thing and an interesting question because, when you look at the stats specifically from last season, Purdy and Murray were nearly identical, 3,800 passing yards each around that ballpark. Brock had 20 touchdowns, whereas Kyler had 21 touchdowns, and Brock had 12 interceptions, whereas Kyler had 11 interceptions. So when you think statistically, they're pretty similar. But I think Keyshawn brings up a great point in just that his production from Purdy in the biggest moments really kind of gives him that edge in that he's been to multiple NFC championships and ultimately gotten the team to a Super Bowl in his first few years as a starter in the NFL, whereas Kyler Murray has only been to the postseason one time in his NFL career so far. That started in 2019 when he was the #1 overall pick. And I think if you flip the roles where Kyler was in San Francisco, he may do well with some of those weapons like CMC and George Kittle and others like Brandon Ayuk, a former Arizona State star locally here. But then you think about what the story would be and the way the fan base could rally around a guy like Brock Purdy if he was switched into the Cardinals' shoes. He grew up in Arizona, Queen Creek, not too far from where State Farm Stadium is, went to Perry High School. It would be a really cool story, a homecoming story, if he ended up being an Arizona Cardinals. So I think I would personally pick Brock Purdy if he had to switch roles and be a Cardinal.
Wow. I mean, I can't even call that a non-homer take because Brock Purdy is also from Arizona, as you mentioned. But I'm a little surprised. It's going to make me a little bit stupid because I'm going to pick Kyler Murray, actually. And to answer the first part of the question, I'm not shocked, like either of you, that both Purdy and Kyler were outside the top 12. When I look at the list, the one guy who I definitely put them both above, though, Baker Mayfield, who was ranked 10th with the Bucs. Other than that, not many guys I'd really move below them. As for who I'd rather have, I'd take Kyler Murray. Blake, you're a guy. Yeah, you have the work ethic concerns with Kyler that you don't have with Brock, but I love what Murray can do with his legs. It just raises his floor so much for me because of the way he can improvise. The amount of times I've just seen him scamper on impossible plays, convert a crazy critical, 3rd and long. You just don't really see that from Brock Purdy. Purdy can make things happen on a broken play too, but not to the extent that Kyler Murray can. My impression of Brock, Keyshawn, similar to the narrative that you brought up, his success is sort of due to all the talent around him on that offense, and we saw that last year that when it goes away, he isn't nearly as effective. Now, he can prove me wrong this season. That was just one season last year. All of the injuries ravaged that entire Niners team. But for me, I'd rather have Kyler than the $265 million man over in Santa Clara. Unless, of course, we're talking after mid-October because that's when the new Call of Duty comes out. But, we'll see what happens this season. Ryan Dyrud, LAFBnetwork.com, over to you now. First of all, what do you think of Matthew Stafford coming in at 6? And are you taking Brock Purdy or Kyler Murray in this one?
Yeah, I mean, quickly with Stafford, I think it's a good spot. I won't dive into too much to derail this conversation. I'm not a huge fan of guys with such little production going so high. They had Jaden Daniels at 5th, who I thought had a fantastic rookie season, but I think putting him in front of seasoned guys like Matthew Stafford, Justin Herbert, others, I would have him a little lower. But I think Stafford's right there in that 5, 6, 7 area. So I think that was well warranted. In terms of the question, like in LA, it's really hard to pick a 49er. I do actually really like Brock Purdy. I love his story, and it's so ironic. Here we are talking about the former first overall pick and the former last overall pick, about who you would rather have based on their NFL careers thus far. It's tough, but I agree with you, Ethan. I would actually lean Kyler Murray just because I think the ceiling, now unfortunately we haven't really seen that fully play out, whether it's due to injuries, whether it's due to just kind of late season things falling apart, whether it's due to coaching, whatever you want to blame it on, hasn't fully been all put together. But I think Kyler Murray, just the body of work, the athleticism, the arm talent, just gives you a little bit higher ceiling. Brock Purdy, I think, has had a fantastic career so far. Like I said, I do love his story. I'm probably going to get toasted for this, but the beginning of his career kind of reminds me a little bit of Mark Sanchez, a guy that went with the New York Jets, went to back-to-back AFC championship games, looked like was on the rise, and then unfortunately the career kind of really fell off from there. I'm not at all saying that that's necessarily going to happen to Purdy, but this year with the offseason turnover the Niners have seen, you've seen a lot of weapons leave. There's a lot of defense that might not be as strong as it has been in years past, although getting Robert Saleh back certainly helps as the DC. So I just want to see how Brock Purdy now performs on his second contract with a little different pieces around him than he had early on. So tough call. I think both are good quarterbacks, but I would lean a little bit more towards Kyler Murray.
Wow, Brock Purdy is Mark Sanchez. Ryan, that's a narrative I can get behind right there. That's one that I can do. All right, let's move on. Next topic. Pro Football Focus ranked all of the divisions from strongest to weakest heading into next season. The NFC West came in 3rd behind only the NFC North and AFC West. Do you agree? And where would you rank our division if not? Ryan Dyer, go back to you of LA Fan Network. Let's go back to you. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think this is actually pretty fair. I think, the AFC West is absolutely loaded when you look at, now the Raiders having former Seahawks coach Pete Carroll and kind of the revamp there with the Raiders, and the other 3 teams all making the playoffs. Chiefs, obviously we know about the dynasty they have. And the NFC North, how strong that is, I think that's probably the second best, or you could do a 1A, 1B. And I think the NFC West does slide in, and the NFC West has had kind of a good run, you could say almost a decade or so, of really strong play from all 4 teams. Now, there's been obviously some years there where some teams have fallen off, and Arizona's been kind of at the bottom. No disrespect, Blake, at the bottom for a little bit here, but I think we'll see them start climbing back up.
That's fair.
But I think when you look around the league, every division has at least, outside of the other 2 that we mentioned, every division has at least like one team that is a clear kind of bottom tier team. Even when you look at like the AFC North with Baltimore and Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, but I think Cleveland's kind of weighing that down. I think the NFC West, I think Arizona's done a lot of good things this offseason. I think finally going into John Gannon's, this next season for him is a pivotal one, but I think we'll see some big improvement there. So, yeah, I think ranking 3rd feels like a good spot. And between the Rams, the Seahawks, the Niners, and even the Cardinals, it's still really kind of up for grabs who could really win that division, which tells you it's a strong division considering all 4 teams are pretty fairly competitive.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'll go next. I will say, I'll start this off by saying it's very weird to see our division so high on this list after, Keyshawn will remember, we talked ad nauseum on this show all of last season about how much weaker the division turned out to be compared to the expectations coming into the year. I mean, the NFC West was one of just 3 divisions to not have a team with more than 10 wins. But, Ryan, to your point, it was also the only division to have all 4 teams finish with over 6 wins, or 6 or more wins, I should say. So we may be one of the deepest divisions in the league, but I don't think we're the 3rd best in football, in my opinion, simply because I don't think there's a true A-tier Super Bowl contender in the NFC West. I look at the NFC East. Obviously, the NFC North and the AFC West ahead of the NFC West. But I look at the NFC East with the Eagles and Commanders at the top. They're in the NFC Championship game. Despite the Giants at the cellar of the NFL, I'd still put them above the NFC West since they have 2 teams who could legitimately lift the Lombardi Trophy next February. Other than that, though, I really don't see any other divisions that I'd put above our own. I don't see any Super Bowl contenders in this division personally, but I do see 4 potential playoff teams. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the NFC West own 2 or even all 3 wildcard spots heading into the postseason with the Cardinals' improvements, with the Seahawks I think are going to be better than people think they are. And obviously we know about the Rams and Niners as contenders. So to answer the question, I'll lower the NFC West in my personal rankings to 4th best in the league, with the NFC East slotting in at 3rd. But I do think there's a sizable gap between us and 5th, which probably would be the AFC North, Ryan, as you mentioned. Keyshawn, let's go over to you. What do you think about all this?
You know, Ethan, first I got to disagree with your NFC East point. I think that the New York Giants and Dallas Cowboys are going to be garbage next year. I think the Giants will only have probably 4 or 5 wins. I think the Cowboys maybe might have 6 wins. And looking at our division, I think there's actually is a Super Bowl contender. I think it's the Los Angeles Rams. Now, I think the Niners, as I said ad nauseum, they have such an easy schedule. This is a team that should have at least double-digit wins. So I feel like the Niners have somewhere between 10 and 11 wins. I think the Rams got somewhere between 12 and 13. And I still think that, you know, when you look at the AFC West and NFC North, I wouldn't be surprised if a 4th-place team in one of those divisions had 8 wins. That's how good they are. So I still feel like they're above the NFC West, but I still think that the NFC West should be 3rd in terms of rankings in divisions.
Yeah, back our division. I'm not gonna trash you there, Keyshawn. I like it. Blake, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a lot of the rest of the group. I think this is a pretty fair evaluation of the NFC West. I think top to bottom, you could make a reasonable argument that this is the most competitive, like from a close matchup perspective in all of football. Just so many close matchups and not really a clear contender of who's going to pull away with this division and ultimately get the division crown. And then I think, you know, they rank the NFC North as the best division in this. I think it's got to be the AFC West. I mean, when you look at what Bo Nix was able to do with the Denver Broncos last season, leading them to the postseason for the first time, I think, since Peyton Manning was there, and then you look at what the Chiefs have already done, and I think there's just so much excitement in that division with Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers, and then Pete Carroll coming in with Geno Smith in Las Vegas with the Raiders. You know, the NFC North had 2 of the best teams in all of football last season with the Vikings and the Lions, at least in the regular season. I think, and then you just put the NFC West right behind those 2 kind of front-running divisions. I think the NFC West could certainly cause some chaos around the NFL with some teams that you know, could be under the radar right now, but ultimately could really create some interesting matchups come later on in the season.
Yeah, it'll be a fun division race to play out. I feel like one of the more fun ones across the league this season with how just tightly packed and deep this division is. All right, final topic. Ranking season isn't complete without some sort of Mount Rushmore question, so I'll commit to the bit for this one. Give me your team's top 4 players right now heading into the season. Who's on your team's Mount Rushmore for this season? I know Mount Rushmores are normally historical, but I'm breaking the rules here. Blake, you're first with the Cardinals. Top 4 players.
Yeah, so the Mount Rushmore for me right now, players that are actively on the roster, is one, Budda Baker. He's been the whole heart and soul of this team for so long and is continuing to play at a historic level. He led the team in tackles last season, and then I put Kyler Murray up there. I know I went against him with the Brock Purdy take, but he's still a very talented quarterback. Former Heisman Trophy winner, a couple-time Pro Bowler. He's still got that potential with his legs and what he can do with his arm talent. So he's definitely one of the better players on the team. Arguably the best. Some could argue on offense. And then Trey McBride. Getting the huge extension this offseason, well worthy of it. I think he's, one of the best tight ends in football, right in that conversation with Kelsey and others, and George Kittle, of course. And then I think the last spot is a close one between James Conner and Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm going to give it to Marvin Harrison Jr. just based on what the upside potential could be for this season. A running back in year 9 in the NFL is tough to bring production, so that's my Mount Rushmore. Marvin Harrison Jr. gets the final spot.
I like it. All right, Ryan, let's go over to you quickly. Who are the Rams' top 4 players right now heading into the season?
Yeah, I think it starts and ends with Matthew Stafford. I think, I'm curious when we get to Keyshawn and you, Ethan, what it's going to be, but I feel like if your quarterback is not on your Mount Rushmore for going into the year, probably not a real contender, but, we'll see what you guys have to say. So Stafford obviously on there going into his age 37 season, turns 38 this year, and obviously hoping to go out on top with a Super Bowl win. Next, we got to go Puka Nacua. I mentioned earlier losing Cooper Kupp, bringing Devontae Adams, but Puka Nacua is kind of the face of this Los Angeles Rams team. Here in LA, when you talk about the Rams, it is all about Puka Nacua, who now everyone has to buy new jerseys, going from 17 to 12, but a lot of love for Puka, and obviously coming off back-to-back great seasons, looking to capitalize that in year 3. Number 3, I'll stick with offense. I mentioned him earlier as well, contract year, but I think Kyren Williams right now, a lot of this team's success is going to depend on this running game, and obviously he will be the headline back. Now, obviously next year he may not be on the team, so it's a short-lived Mount Rushmore potentially for him, but for this season, 2025, as far as the Rams go, Kyren Williams is going to help aid them in getting there. And for the final spot on defense, most everyone would probably assume you put Jared Verse in here, the defending defensive rookie of the year. I love Jared Verse. I love his motor. I love what he is going to become as a Ram. But for right now, I'm going with Kobe Turner, who's also on the defensive line. He was robbed last year of the defensive rookie of the year. He should have won it, or I should say 2 years ago. Last year was year 2, almost identical production on the interior, kind of playing that pseudo Aaron Donald role, and he's doing it very well. So the Rams lost Aaron Donald. They filled his void by adding 4 young players, and they've done a really good job of rebuilding that, and that's headlined right now still by Kobe Turner.
All right, Keyshawn, Ryan called us out. Who do you have for the Niners, and does Brock Purdy make the list? Or else you're not a contender.
That's why I was laughing this whole time. So I guess the Niners are contenders because Brock Purdy is not in the Mount Rushmore going into the 2025 season. But before Niner fans jump at me in the comments, I'm going to give y'all some context. Each player I'm about to name are on track to being first ballot Hall of Famers. First, I'm going to go with George Kittle, who was literally just ranked the top tight end according to AP rankings literally yesterday. And he done really well for them this past season when there was injuries all around the offense and the team itself. And then I got to go with Fred Warner, who is the best linebacker in football. I can say that with confidence. You know, with Kittle, some people argue with Travis Kelce, but no, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Warner is the best linebacker in football. So I'm going to go with him. And even to look at the NFL Top 100 every year, Fred Warner is always in the top 10 or somewhere between the top 15. My third guy has got to be Christian McCaffrey. Now, I know some people will say, well, we don't know he's going to be the same player that he was in 2023 since he was so injury-riddled last year. Well, let me see that in reality. And I think that McCaffrey's going to have a great year coming up. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to be the Offensive Player of the Year, but I still think that as of right now, going into the season, it's either him or Saquon Barkley as the best running backs in football. And my fourth guy, I got to go with Trent Williams, arguably the best left tackle in NFL history. I might be a homer saying that, but Trent Williams, when he's healthy, the Niners offense looks completely different. Purdy has more time in the pocket. Now, like I said, each guy I just named are on track to being first ballot Hall of Famers. Purdy's been doing well for the Niners, but he's not a Hall of Famer as we speak.
Giving $265 million to a guy who's not a top 4 player on your roster, you know, I don't know. It's sort of poor roster management. I'm joking. Ryan, I do see your point with a quarterback not being a top 4 player in your team means maybe you aren't a Super Bowl contender. I feel like for a division contender, I think, I don't have Sam Darnold on my list. I need to see him do it another year, but I think the Seahawks can absolutely compete for this division. And it starts with the defense that gave Matthew Stafford a lot of trouble in that first matchup with the Seahawks. My first pick, it has to be Leonard Williams. He's disruptive on both the interior and exterior of the defensive line, an excellent run defender as well as pass rusher. And as we saw last year, incredibly athletic for a big man, showing it off with the 92-yard pick 6 against Aaron Rodgers. He was top 10 in the whole league in sacks and tackles for loss. Somehow just barely cracked the NFL's top 100 list. Not salty at all about that. For my 2 spot, going cornerback Devin Witherspoon, staying on the defensive side of the ball. Pro Bowler in both of his first 2 years in the league after being drafted 5th overall. Spoon's been a force playing both inside and outside for Mike McDonald's defense. He can do it all, the Illinois alum. He was 2nd in total tackles on the Hawks last season, and his elite versatility. It's going to be instrumental in what could be a top 5 defense in football this year. Number 3, I'll go over to the offense. I'm going Jackson Smith-Njigba. He broke out in year 2, leading the team with over 1,100 receiving yards, good for 12th most in the league. He was one of just 10 receivers to catch 100 or more passes. He also added 6 touchdowns on top of that. The Seahawks and Sam Darnold are now relying on JSN to be a #1 receiver. We'll see what Cooper Kupp does and how he fits in there, if they're more splitting time, Ryan, like you mentioned earlier in the episode. I think he can live up to the billing, and he'll need to if the Hawks want to make the playoffs this season. For my final spot, I'll wrap it up. Again, I thought about going Sam Darnold. He finished 10th in MVP voting last year, but need to see him do it another year. Instead, I'm going to go linebacker Ernest Jones IV. After the Hawks traded for him midseason, he was just incredible, completely transformed this defense. It was a completely different unit in just 10 games with the team. He finished 3rd in tackles, averaging just under 10 a game, and the Seahawks were smart to prioritize bringing him back over the offseason. Having Jones back to quarterback this defense is another reason I'm very optimistic they can be a top 5 unit in the entire league this year. All right, that's going to do it for us. The next time you see us a week from now, I can't believe I'm saying this, training camp will be fully underway, and we'll have you covered with reports from each team around the NFC West. A reminder, you can see us anytime on the Fox Local app. You can see all our stuff on our respective Fox Local websites, and also Ryan's great Rams content at lafbnetwork.com. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next time.